Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, raising emotionally aware boys who turn into strong men. I am speaking with a friend, colleague, and former podcast guest, Tosha Schore. Tosha is a dynamic leader and globally recognized speaker and trainer dedicated to empowering parents and the professionals who support them. As the founder of Parenting Boys Peacefully and the creator of the Out with Aggression program, Tosha has equipped thousands of parents and professionals worldwide with tools to transform challenging behaviors by fostering connection, confidence, and compassion in their relationships with children. She is also an author of Listen, 5 Simple Tools to Meet Your Everyday Parenting Challenges. Today's conversation isn't just about the challenges boys face in expressing emotions, but also about the strategies we can use to help them navigate their feelings in a world that often makes it difficult. Parents in my community submitted some questions, and while we don't read them verbatim, we'll address the themes as thoroughly as possible. We'll talk about the impact of emotionally inaccessible fathers and explore how we can help boys develop healthy communication skills and learn emotional intelligence. We'll dive into how to create safe spaces where boys feel empowered to express themselves without fear of judgment. How do we challenge stereotypes, normalize diverse emotions, and understand that no two children, especially boys, are alike? Tosha shares real-life examples and personal insights, both from her own life and professional experience. She'll tell us about the father who transformed his relationship with his son by embracing emotional connection and how modeling emotional intelligence in everyday moments can make a lasting impact. We'll also discuss the importance of emotional work for parents, how understanding your child's unique emotional style, respecting their boundaries, and practicing self-reflection can make a big difference. Plus, we'll touch on the dynamics of emotional labor in parenting. How can we support each other in raising emotionally healthy children without expecting one parent to carry the emotional burden alone? So whether you're a mom, a dad, or simply someone interested in building emotionally intelligent relationships, this episode is for you. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening. Tosha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. It's been a minute.
I know. It's so nice to reconnect with old friends and old guests, it's fun. And thank you for inviting me to speak to your community. I really enjoyed speaking with the members of your community. Very, very, aware and conscious, interesting parents. I really enjoyed that. Their questions were very deep.
Thank you. They loved it as well. I'm really, really glad we could bring you in.
Yeah, clearly, they're part of your community. They learned a lot from you. They were really, ready, and they're doing such amazing work already. What I want to talk to you about today is how to raise emotionally aware, attuned boys who become emotionally available, emotionally intelligent, you name it, men. A lot of people are raising boys. When I posted in my community that you were coming, we got plethora of questions. Of course, we can't answer those questions individually, but the themes we can look at the themes and try to answer in one episode. You raised 3 boys. My question is, since I don't have boys, Is there difference between raising boys and girls? And of course, you haven't raised girls, but like, what do you hear from people?
Yes, I do believe that there's a difference, and I believe that we're doing a disservice to our boys and our world by denying that. It's really about how we look at boys versus girls, the stereotypes we have. There is definitely research that I can't quote, but I can, certainly point people towards that shows that teachers in a classroom respond very differently to boys than they do to girls, for example, more harshly, more consequences, more shame. And that has an impact, right? And I think we are lying to ourselves if we don't think that we're bringing those stereotypes with us into our parenting because we are all products of the world that we live in and the societies that we live in. And the patriarchy is real, and the beliefs that we have sort of inherited just by moving in the spaces that we move in are part of who we are unless we fight to change them. And so if we don't do anything, then I think we do parent our boys very differently than we parent our girls. But what I like to say is that as parents of boys, we have an amazing opportunity. We can come in when they're young and when there's so much time still and create spaces for them to get really comfortable with their feelings, which I think ultimately is the goal. If we're going to raise emotionally intelligent men, then we need to stop labeling certain feelings as masculine, certain feelings as feminine. We need to stop shutting down their feelings. We need to learn how to not be afraid of the feelings that are big and loud and often upsetting to us. And we need to learn how to feel comfortable with the softer feelings, the feelings of maybe jealousy or things that we've labeled feminine that we tend to not take so seriously in boys.
Yeah, I agree. It is quite challenging. I think it's easier, what I've observed in people raise sort of in a unisex way when the kids are young, right? When you have a 4-year-old boy, unless, of course, parents have stereotypes that a boy can never cry, you have to be tough, you are a man. Some families instill those kind of ideas from a very young age. But it seems like when the kids are young, we accept that boys and girls have the same feelings, right? We allow our boys to cry and we support them and things like that. But the moment they grow a little bit, the expectations and the conversation sort of changes, right? What can you say about that? Like, why is that?
Well, first of all, I would just say that I don't think we're as neutral as you think we are. I think
Okay.
actually we stereotype from very early, and our expectations are different from very early. And I can't remember the age exactly, but it's something like, by the age of 4 or something, boys are really relegated to I can be angry or I can be happy. There's just not a lot of variance there, and there's not a lot of room for the myriad of feelings that we all feel as humans, right? From jealousy to envy to sadness to heartbreak, all of these things that we go through and we feel like we need to be normalizing them. And I think we stereotype pretty young.
Yeah. I also think, like what do children see, right? How do they see what they see in their homes? Let's say if it's a, father mother dynamic, if the father is not showing any emotion and men of certain generation clearly were not raised to show emotion, to be in touch with emotions, there's a lot of stigma and shame. So I guess children just observe and internalize, right? The role models are there. Is it seeing the role models? Is it parenting? There are multiple influences, probably, right?
Yeah, there are multiple influences, and I think there's definitely ample research that shows that boys in particular suffer when their fathers are absent. But I don't want to just take that research and get depressed because a lot of us, myself included, grew up with absent fathers and we turned out just fine. So I want to highlight what we can do versus try to control the things that we can't control. So, again, back to there being an opportunity. How can, if a father, whether they are physically present or not, is emotionally absent, how can another adult in that child's life step in and be that person, be what research calls the super protective factor that allows that child to know that they're safe, to know that they're loved. And within that space, they're able to develop that emotional intelligence. I'm just thinking actually also about a dad who I have supported for the last several years, who is an older man in his, even older than me, in his 70s, I believe. And he has grown children my age. And then he's in a second marriage, and he and his wife adopted a child from the foster system who, when they came to me, I believe was about 14, and I think he's like 16 now. You might get those numbers slightly wrong, but that's essentially the age. And when he came to me, he said, Tasha, we cannot both live in this house. It's either me or him. Like that was the situation that he was in. And you talked about a certain generation a moment ago. Yeah, this was his generation, and he raised his first set of children in a very authoritarian, traditional type of parenting. And they were pretty easy kids and they got through and it all worked out okay. But this child was not responding to that type of parenting. And it was heartbreaking for him to hear, it's him or me. He was scared for the safety of his wife, right? The child was aggressive and everybody was miserable. And this father has turned things around. Like he's done a complete 180. He has now the most amazing relationship with that child. I'm not saying it's perfect. The child is definitely struggling in school with academics. There's some hard points, but there's no aggression anymore. And the dad and the kid, they go on fishing trips together. They play basketball in the front yard. Like they have a relationship based on connection, and the dad keeps that connection front and center. He's no longer afraid of the child's big feelings. He understands that they need to come out, that it's not his fault, that the child's carrying a lot of trauma. And he has just shifted the way that he responds. And then, as a result of that, the child has had space to change the way he shows up. So, yeah, there's some absent fathers. There's kids who come to us with trauma, whether out of the foster system or just our own kids. But there's still so much we can do. There's so many stories I can share of hard situations where parents have turned things around simply by creating space for that child to have feelings and leaning into connection as opposed to getting all riled up about the surface behaviors.
Yeah, I think, by creating that safety, that sense of safety, then the children, there is room for all feelings, especially for boys, right? Somehow, of course, our culture, it's anger and aggression is more accepted if boys show anger, and it becomes this masking thing, right? All emotions come out through the anger pipeline, no matter what, and there is no room for other feelings. And I think it's important to note, I remember, I think our first conversation with you, you have three boys. I remember you saying that each child is different, like their emotional world, how they feel, the depth, the intensity is different. There was a question in our community from a mom who is concerned about her son's emotional well-being. There is divorce in the family, and mom thinks and assumes that it's affecting the child, but the child states the opposite. The child doesn't show any signs, but mom worries. And because the father, as she stated in the question, is not emotionally available, let's say it in common terms, she's afraid that the son will be just like him. And I wanted to talk about individual differences in children. Not all boys are going to be the same. Not all girls are the same. No human, we're not, we don't experience emotions the same way. Why should, we expect that from boys?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. They run the gamut. There are boys who wear their feelings on their sleeve. There are boys who hold them very close to them, very, I forget what the expression is, very close to their, I can't remember what you say. I don't even know how you say it, but you know what I mean. They're just more close. The first thing, actually, before we even talk about that, I want to address one thing that just came to mind when you shared that question from the parent, which is that I hear that that parent is worried. You used that word. I'm assuming that they used that word, and that's why you did. And I want to put out there that it's very hard for anybody to change when somebody close to them is worried about them. So if you're listening to this, I just want you to think about, someplace you're struggling. Maybe you're struggling to earn enough money, or you're struggling to lose weight, or stop smoking, or I don't know what it is. And then I want you to just consider that your parent or your partner is really worried about you. And that's what's coming through as they're trying to support you and how that's landing for you. Because I've never met anybody who could really execute meaningful change while other people were worrying about them. And I don't say that to make this parent feel bad. I just say it to shine a light. We all do this. And when we have kids who are struggling with hard behaviors or a world that feels as scary as our current world feels, we're going to be scared. We're going to have worry. But what I would like to propose is that we take it elsewhere. And there are lots of places you can take it. We won't go into it now, but essentially we have to do our own emotional work so that we can show up to these boys not worried. Because if, for example, you've got a boy who, like it sounds in this case, is pretty closed, doesn't share a lot, you can be sure that if you continue to worry about him, you're not going to be hearing about anything. So first and foremost, that. And it's not that you have to get rid of all the worry and then you come back to your boy. This all happens in concert, at the same time. We're doing all the things at the same time. With a kid who is holding their feelings close and not so expressive, I think it's really important for us to ask ourselves whether or not we have an agenda for this child. Does this child feel like there's one right way to express themselves, or that it's not okay to be quiet or to keep things close? Are we expecting or asking or demanding that they have a conversation with us? Maybe that's not their way. Maybe that's never going to be their way. That doesn't mean they can't express themselves. There might be other ways, but are we kind of shutting doors because we're stuck on this one way that we want them to communicate with us? So that's a question to ask, because I find a lot of parents are in that place, especially a lot of moms, people like me who like to talk things out. And just an example, like I got into a tiff with my partner the other day and we were upset at each other and I wanted to talk about it. And he said, I don't want to talk about this right now. And I've been in this relationship for 30 years or whatever. So like by now, I get it, right? So I let it go. And the next day he said, look, I didn't want to talk about it because I knew that if I did, I would start yelling. I would say things I didn't feel good about. I would start acting in ways that remind me of my father, one of my brothers, and I don't want to be that person. I don't want to act like that. And I said, like, I really appreciate you knowing that about yourself, right? Do I wish he were different and that he could talk about it like me and do it my way? Absolutely. Is that going to happen? No. He's different than I am, and that's okay. And I'm different than he is, and there are ways that he's got to modify his expectations as well, right? So with our kids who are holding their feelings close, what would happen if we started doing a lot more listening than demanding talking from them? For example, I have a child who is like this. He keeps his feelings pretty close. And the other people in this family will say to me, Ima, he never talks about anything. Like he doesn't share his feelings. He's not in touch with his feelings, blah, blah, blah. And I say, actually, I respectfully disagree. And I don't say it this way, but I really think like if you could shut up for 5 minutes, then you would hear something, right? Because the truth of the matter is this child won't fight for airtime. If everybody's going at it and we're loud and we're arguing and we're talking and in good faith and all of that, but that's not his way. And so if we're going to respect his way, then we need to be able to calm and quiet and hold space for the way that he likes to communicate. And I feel very close to that child, and I'm not worried about that child because I know that he knows that I know that he processes differently, and that when he needs me, he will call me, and he'll say, Ima, and I'll come and I'll go to his room and I'll like sit on the foot of his bed, and he could not say anything for 5 minutes or for 20 minutes. And I know that, and I just sit there and I don't ask him a million questions. I just wait. And when he's ready, he talks. And if he needs to, he cries. And he shares all the things. And when I feel like he's kind of done at a certain point, I'll say, do you want me to stay here some more, or are you ready for me to leave? And often he'll say, like, I'm ready for you to leave. And I'll say, and that's it. And then we don't go back and like have a big conversation. And I don't go downstairs and say, like, hey, you guys, guess what? Your brother just like told me all this stuff. And like, no, it's just like I'm meeting him where he is and he communicates differently. And that's okay. He doesn't have to do it my way.
Are you looking for personalized support on your parenting journey? I offer one-on-one coaching tailored to your needs, including court-ordered parenting classes and co-parenting counseling. These services are available to anyone, no matter where you live, whether in the United States or abroad. As a special thank you to my listeners, you can enjoy 10% off all coaching packages. Visit authenticparenting.com to learn more about my services and how we can work together to achieve your parenting goals. Oh my gosh, this is such a brilliant point. And I love that you shared your personal examples, specifically with our partners too. Like we demand from people to do it our way, right? There is this need, there is this wish, some kind of like an infantile desire almost, maybe from childhood lingering there. But you're so right. I mean, everybody has their own way of, moving through life and experiencing the world, expressing their feelings. Just because it doesn't fit our agenda or our expectation doesn't mean we can be dismissive, We have to look at connecting where they are and how they want to connect. This is genius. I really love this. You're right. Like we have to let go of those agendas that we have and just talking through our feelings. I hear that in my office oftentimes when I work with co-parents, they always say, I want to talk about what happened yesterday. And in my mind, I'm like, why? Like he clearly doesn't want to talk about this. And there is a different way of processing things. And so I think having respect for each other's way of processing things is so important. This is such like important point that needs like a big sign.
Yeah, it's also part of modeling emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence isn't walking around our world and our relationships demanding that everybody do things our way. It's learning how to show empathy. It's noticing how other people respond to how we act and perhaps shifting how we act accordingly. I mean, I think a lot of like, how do we raise emotionally intelligent kids? I mean, my kids are now 18, 20, and 22, not kids anymore. And just this week, one of them called because he had had a really upsetting conversation with a family member of his girlfriend. And they have very different political beliefs, my son and this member of his girlfriend's family. And he was just all riled up and upset, and she was all riled up and upset, the member of the family, and they had both said things that were, I'd say, hurtful, things like you've been brainwashed or things like that, right? Like just not helpful things. Um, but I was really happy that he called me and that first I could just listen to what was upsetting about it. And then he wanted to talk it out. And I said, it sounds like there are two things going on here. To me, tell me if I'm wrong. But one thing I'm hearing is that you are feeling like you don't have enough information to really back up your opinions. And that's just a really great thing to know. And it's also a really easy thing to solve. So, what are some ideas that you have? And here are some ideas that I have afterwards, right, about how to gather information. But More important than that is what would it look like? Essentially, I said to him, "You're doing the same thing she's doing. Like you guys are just going down each other's throats and trying to convince each other that you're right, which isn't going to get you anywhere." But I said, "What would happen if you got curious?" Because even though you and I like deeply disagree with these things that she's saying, something brought her there. Like she has a story. And what would happen if you got curious about that? What if instead of saying you've been brainwashed, you said, wow, like I think about that really differently. I have a really different perspective. I'm curious. How did you get to believing that? Right? Because then you're built, that's emotional intelligence. You have to care about somebody else. You can't just be blinded by one thing that they say. So I'm always saying to parents, just look for opportunity. I try to seize every opportunity that I can with my boys to teach emotional intelligence. And it's not like a 5-step process, right? It's just like when something like this happens, how can we turn it into an opportunity for learning? And I'm just doing this all the time. And I want to encourage parents out there, whether your kid is, 5 or 15 or 50, are there opportunities that maybe you're missing to talk about topics that bottom line are about emotional intelligence? And also, what are you modeling? Right? We're living right now in the United States in a very divisive time politically. How are you acting? Right? I couldn't have had that conversation with my kid and had him or expected him to be responsive to it if I'm being hot-headed all the time and I'm not being curious about other people who think differently than me. Right? I need to be modeling this too. Am I perfect? No. Do I get upset sometimes? Absolutely. But I'm aware of it. And I can go, oh, that really wasn't helpful. Like that conversation went nowhere. Another opportunity, let's talk about why. Like, gosh, what would have happened if I had gotten curious instead of just jumping down that person's throat because I was running on emotion and felt heated about it?
Yeah.
I'm talking a lot.
This is great. I'm enjoying listening to you. I'm gonna use again one of the questions and sort of paraphrase it and ask in a way that like people are asking this. Shall I worry if I ask my boy, how are you feeling? How did that make you feel? All this questioning around feelings, will that make them too soft, too weak? There was a couple of questions about that.
I definitely do not see that making boys weak or, I mean, soft. I think I would say, why do we not want them to have a softness? I think that part of what's missing is a softness, and I think we need to show them that it's okay for them to show their soft side also, because that's also part of emotional intelligence, like accepting all of who we are. Wait, ask me again. I forgot the other bit of the question.
Basically, you answered the question. Should we worry if we are always saying, "How are you feeling, honey?" But just a focus on this hyper focus on the emotions all the time, specifically, with boys, will that have negative impact? Meaning they will be like weak and too soft.
Well, I mean, I would say that it might have a negative impact, but that's not the negative impact that I see happening. The negative impact that I see happening with the families that I work with is that if we are insisting, like we talked about before, on talking about it this way, it pushes them away and closes them down if that's not their way. I have a kid who it is his way, and he loves that, and we hash it all out, and he loves to talk about it for everything. And, it's the opposite. I'm like, TMI, dude, like you're my kid. I don't want to know all the things. Stop. Right. So, but I think the negative impact that I see most often is their boys then shutting down more because they don't feel seen. They just feel like you have an agenda and you want them to do things your way, and that's not their way. So if you're stuck in that back and forth with your kid, I would practice listening in the way that I explained with that example with one of my kids who holds his feelings closer, right? Who's more closed in that way.
Yeah.
More listening and less talking.
Yeah, I'm hearing a theme emerge here, right? Listen more, attune and observe, neglect your agenda and view each child as an individual and approach them individually. It comes down to that, basically. There was also a question about the fathers, in the household being more stern and authoritarian, and mom doing the emotional work. And actually, in our support call, somebody asked a question yesterday about this. I wish I had saved it. It's like mom was saying that she is upset with her partner. She wants her children, her boys to be different. But my comment was, well, if you are constantly throwing at your partner's face that you're not emotionally tuned or available, or you're undermining him, you're being disrespectful, your boys see this, right? They see this is the man, this is how women treat this type of man. And inadvertently, like, we communicate messages and they learn things. So I think my comment to her was, you have to treat your partner with decency and, respect in those moments, even though he's not emotionally available. Like, undermining them in front of the kids, it just has negative impact on the kids.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I would start with the relationship, right? I would say, what might be different if you got curious about why he's like that? Because he wasn't born that way. But most men were deeply shamed when they were very young for being emotional. And that looks a lot of different ways, but there was likely nobody protecting their right to feel as a child. And so they learned really young that they needed to shut down to survive. That's not their fault. And so to hold it against them, I think, is not fair. But I do think it would be interesting to have a conversation about how they feel about it. How do they feel like they got to where they are? And are they content, or would they like to perhaps have a different kind of relationship with their child? How do you feel about how things, about your relationship with your boy? Listen again. Get curious. We're coming back to the same themes over and over again, but listen and get curious, because I've never met a dad ever, and I work with tons of dads who aren't, who isn't deeply sensitive and who doesn't want more than anything else to be close to his boy. Really. Like, I've worked with so many dads, and they all want that. Does that mean that they know how? No. But we need to be patient with them. Again, we can't expect them to make this huge jump. It was scary to be shamed, and oftentimes they shut down their boys because they want to protect them. They don't want them to have to go through what they went through as little boys. So it's not like they're trying to make life hard for their boy, or they don't want him to be emotionally intelligent, but they don't want him to be hurt and shamed and left out or teased in the way that they might have been. So again, just understanding their side of the story. And then also, a lot of moms in this situation, like the one you just explained, they're desperately trying to get their partner to do it their way. And again, we have to let go of that, because if he feels like there's an agenda, he's going to just push back too. Like, nobody wants to feel like somebody else has the right answer and knows the way, and they're just trying to bring us over to their side. Everybody, including us, like, we all want to feel heard and understood. And so we need to be doing that for our partners as well. And in the meantime, we can go about modeling and doing the parenting in the way that we feel good about. Kids are amazingly resilient. They can code switch. They can go, often I have parents who are divorced or separated. The kids go back and forth between households, and one parent is worried that the effects that the other parent has on the child is going to be irreversible and all of these things. And I just keep saying, like, let's let go of what we can't control and let's focus in on what we can. And that's how you choose to parent when the child is with you. They just need one person to be their person. And so if you can do that, the kid's going to be okay. And if you're in the same family and the dad, like in this situation, maybe isn't doing as much of the emotional work, you're going to have to be really patient. Like, he can come around, but the timeline isn't necessarily going to be your timeline. And so just model and just allow for him to play to his strengths for now, and you play to your strengths. And then maybe think together about where each of you might like to grow, right? Maybe he's good. I see this a lot at play and can do like rough and tumble play and rough house with the kids and stuff like that. That is an extremely important skill. That builds deep connection. So maybe he's not able to sit down and have the heart to heart. And when your kid wants to have that heart to heart, he comes to you. But to play, he goes to his dad. That's okay. We don't have to like rank it. Both of those things are good.
Yeah, as long as they are getting it from someone in the family or from a caregiver, I feel like that's enough. And oftentimes, I think this emotional labor, attuning to the kids' feelings and regulation falls on the mother's shoulders. Maybe it's changing, but it's like heavily because moms are the default parents still, right? That they are work from home. If they work, they are home. It seems like they do that. Yes, it doesn't mean we should not have expectations from the
No,
dads to step in and regulate with their kids.
I think there's a lot of cognitive load, for example, that even if our
Yeah.
partners are still working on their emotional intelligence from our perspective, talking in a heterosexual relationship, I think that we can now set limits, sort of demand in the friendliest of ways support with the emotional load of parenting that isn't maybe listening to the big feelings, which might be too big of a jump. But what about being responsible for doctor's appointments, remembering when kids need their physicals or their dental appointments or their eye checks or the permission slips for the field trips? Like these are the types of things that often fall on the mother by default. And you don't need to be like in a deeply, emotionally intelligent person to be able to do those things.
Yes.
Many times the men are doing these types of things in their work position, but they're just not doing it at home. And so that's stuff I think that doesn't have to wait. That's about having a conversation, holding limits, and trusting on our part that those things are going to get done. Oftentimes we just go, oh, it's easier to just do it myself. Well, that's not helpful for anybody. And all it
Yeah.
does is lead us to have feelings of resentment.
So true. And sometimes I think I've seen this when a father, let's say, is unable to emotionally be vulnerable and attune and regulate because of their own history, like you spoke about. And sometimes mothers sort of push the fathers to do that prematurely without any learning. It can have more negative impact because then the fathers revert to aggression and more violent language, even physical punishment sometimes. So I think we have to be really conscious of what are we expecting from people? What are they good at? If this dad, for example, is not good at regulating big feelings or staying present, maybe the best thing you could do is to protect your children from the consequences of the aggression or the violence, perhaps, by you doing it.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing necessarily because then you're navigating the waters wisely as long as there is no abuse towards you as the mom. But I feel like sometimes fathers can be rough or violent in their language, or, it can come across like the cut it out, don't cry about this. If you don't want that kind of messaging to get into the household, then maybe you should protect your children from that influence.
I think yes, and yes, I agree. And that can be really hard when you're in the same household. And so, one thing
Do you think people should have conversations about that? Or,
I think people should know their red line,
yeah,
call it their red line, right? It's like we're not going to get everything we want, but what's the red line? Like, is the red line shaming? Is the red line, physically touching the kid? What's your red line? And I think we need to communicate that and in a respectful way, but it might sound something like, hey, I know that you love the kids more than anything, and I know that you would never purposefully do anything to hurt them. And I noticed that when, fill in the blank, when our 10-year-old doesn't respond quickly to a request that I ask of him. I ask him to empty the dishwasher and he doesn't do it, that's a big trigger for you. And oftentimes you will say something that's hurtful. I'm wondering if we could have some sort of a secret like sign or something where you don't have to stay. Like I get that you're triggered where you can just trust that I'll deal with it. And if you forget, I can, say banana or I can stick my tongue out or, scratch the top of my head or whatever it is. And that'll be a sign that, okay, I think this is going to go south. You're excused and I'm fine. I'll deal with it. And one thing that I have found that oftentimes dads really do need to know, especially when there's like physical aggression with the child and the mom, is that the mom is safe. And so oftentimes the dad will say to me, I'm worried about her. I'm worried she's going to get hurt. I'm worried, X, Y, or Z. And then he is always coming in to sort of save the day.
Mm.
And that is not a good dynamic. And so I always say, have a conversation with your partner and ask her, like, are you okay? Do you need my help? And for the moms to be able to say, if I need your help, I promise I will ask. But if I don't need your help, like, I really do need you to stay away. Like, I need you to trust me. I'm fine.
Yeah, because also sometimes when the dad can interfere and it's not, he's more aggressive, let's say, or rushed, because also some dads are, physically bigger and scarier sometimes. Like I was scared of my dad. He was a big guy, very athletic and masculine. He never hit me or anything, just by the sheer presence. It was kind of scary. When I would go home from school, I would open the door, and when I see my dad's shoes were there, I knew he was home. I would say, Dad? And he would say, Yes. So I knew how to behave. There was clearly nothing has happened. I'm being honest. But I was just intimidated by the sheer bigness and the size of this individual. He had a big, presence. And when that type of person can intimidate, it can say something in a rushed or somewhat aggressive tone, it can be really intimidating. And sometimes mothers interfere in that moment. And I think that's what's hazardous to the relationship and to the dynamic. They're like, don't yell at my son, or don't yell at our kids, or don't say that, don't do that. When the mom saves the dynamic, I feel like that can be very, very tricky.
Yeah, sometimes I've found that moms in that situation do well to use play. You have to kind of feel it out with your partner and see how it goes, but do things like if the dad kind of goes off in that way that the mom comes in it's like, oh, you big bear, you angry bear, and sort of gives them a big
Oh,
hug or something like that. Or yeah, that type of thing, which is kind of giving them an out.
yeah.
Right? It's saying, hey, I see you're upset. Like, let's see if we can realize how ridiculous this is because this thing isn't really that important, but without the scolding and the shaming and that type of thing. And we can laugh together and kind of just bring down the level of tension in the room for everybody here.
Yeah, yeah. I think because when moms step in and inadvertently say things like that to protect the kids, what's the message about the dad? Like, it's like, what is the son or the daughter think about their dad, like, and the mom and dad relationship, you know?
I have to also just say that I've worked with no shortage of couples where the roles were reversed, right? So it is not all
No,
situation.
no, yeah,
There are many situations where the mom is much more harsh, aggressive, overpowering, controlling, and the dad is softer. So, I just want to be clear that every situation is unique. There's no one way that dads are or men are or moms
no,
are.
no, no,
I think we
no,
all know
no.
that. I know you,
Yes,
but I just want to say it out loud, just because the
yes,
examples
good.
that I've been using have been kind of one-sided.
Well, because those questions that people send, they are very, moms, first of all, send the questions, and by the sound of some of those questions, they portray their partners in a negative light. And so I'm like going off of that. And so, we're at the end of our conversation. I want to ask you, to summarize maybe, or to highlight the most important points, or is there something that you want to conclude the conversation with?
I think we've touched on a lot of really important things. And the main point that I want everybody to remember is that there's no one right way to do this. You're going to have to figure out what makes sense for you and your kids and your family. But I have yet to meet a family where it wasn't incredibly helpful and needle moving to, in general, talk a lot less and listen a lot more. And if we want to raise emotionally intelligent men from our emotionally intelligent boys, we need to make sure that we do enough of our own work so that we're comfortable actually listening to all the feelings, whether they're big, angry feelings or softer, sadder feelings. Just take some time to notice, how do you feel when your boy shows you these different kinds of feelings? Are you clear that they're all just feelings and they're all very, very normal? And is your goal to be able to be that person for him who can hear it all without losing your balance? Because that's really my wish for all of us, for our boys to know from the time that they are very young that we are here for them no matter what, so that when things are hard, they're not afraid or ashamed to come to us. The last thing that I want is for them to isolate and feel like they need to figure everything out themselves, because that's impossible. It's overwhelming, and that's where we end up with a lot of scary behaviors and hurts happening in this world, whether it's them hurting somebody else or hurting themselves.
Thank you so much. I love what you shared, the nuggets, the little nuggets and the personal examples. I think this will resonate with a lot of people. Thank you so much for your presence, for your wisdom. And I hope we'll connect again soon in the near future.
Thank you so much for inviting me back on. I always love to talk with you.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss future episodes, and take a moment to leave a rating and review. It really helps others find the show. I would love to hear your thoughts and takeaways. Join the conversation in the Authentic Parenting Facebook group or visit the contact page at authenticparenting.com/contact to get in touch. Authentic Parenting is an ad-free show, and your donations is what makes this podcast possible. Support the show by visiting authenticparenting.com/support or becoming a patron at patreon.com. Your contributions make it possible for me to continue bringing you weekly episodes. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.